You see everyone well?
I can see that there are people. I
Okay,
can't see your faces so clearly, but I see that there are people.
but is,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's that front one.
Yeah.
Ben, raise your hand. Do you see Ben?
Hold on. Yes, I see him waving.
So, or do you, and then there's me. So the question is, where's the best place for everyone to sit? Where Ben, the half of them are across Ben, and then there's Ben. Oh, do I
I'm
have?
not gonna really be able to see your faces regardless. So I think where you are is fine if you're comfortable that way.
It looks like that's the camera view she's probably seeing.
It is
I
the
just don't
camera,
know.
correct.
People can move to, it's this very long room. So I'm up here with nobody and everyone's there. So they can move up here. They can stay where they are.
I think that from Ben and the lady across from Ben wearing a black mask and white
Yeah,
sweater,
yeah.
that's like beyond that in your direction is ideal.
So everyone, yeah, that's fine. So they can go here or here, just from, that's fine. And you can tell people to move.
Perfect.
Then, so Linda's coming. She will introduce Merav and then we'll start. So thank you all for your patience.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Julie.
Ben.
And thank you all for being so generous and letting this happen online. I really appreciate that.
Well, Ben isn't then up on both sides, just so Merav can see everybody well. And
Okay,
they can move if needed.
Merav, I don't know if you can see me.
I can.
Can you? Hi.
Yes.
Nice to meet you, and I'm sorry for the delay. We're just trying to get people positioned, and like any good Jewish event, we're running a little bit late, but not too late. You probably see in the room we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about 10 parents. And so I want to introduce Merav to all of you. Merav is the executive director of the Hunter College Hillel and has been actively engaged in Jewish education, in running Jewish nonprofits. She was a student, I think a master's student at NYU, has been deeply, deeply engaged both at Hunter College and as a professional for Hillel International in all of the challenges and frankly, all the richness of Jewish life, but certainly the messiness of what we've been witnessing on campus these last, I'd say, at least 10 to 15 years, maybe even longer. Merav was actually supposed to be at her nephew's bris today, and so things happen. She is actually zooming in from home, but you are seeing Merav on something like 8 or 9 different screens in this room. There's no missing you. And I'm so grateful that you can be with us. Actually, you're not too far away because Merav is in, is it South Orange, right?
Maplewood, yeah, Maplewood.
Maplewood, that's right, exactly. So I'm going to start by asking you a question, and then, I know parents have lots of questions. The situation that we just watched, they all just watched the Crossing the Line video. Merav, I think that reflects the situation on many campuses, but not all campuses.
Mhm.
And so I wonder if you could start by giving us a sense of what is happening out there, what you're seeing. Is it as bad as it looks? And there's a lot of questions, are our Jewish students getting engaged in these, battles per se? Are they checking out? And what kind of keeps you up at night as you work with the Jewish students at your campus?
Okay, I'm just taking some notes on what you asked. Is it as bad as it looks? What keeps me up at night? What are Jewish students engaging in? Okay, so I'll start with this. Hello, everybody. Good morning. It's really nice to see you all. I wish I was there with you in person. Linda very generously allowed for me to zoom in. I was supposed to be at my nephew's bris. His name is Theo. He's very cute. I'm sure he's recovering. And actually, as it turns out, I have a 9-month-old and a 3.5-year-old, and My 9-month-old tested positive for COVID on Friday. He's fine. Everybody, don't worry. He's really okay, but we're quarantining for the next 10 days. So irregardless, I would have had to be here. So I've been at Hunter Hillel for 5 years. I've been in the Hillel movement for 7. I've been working in the Jewish nonprofit community for over a decade. And what I'll say to you is I'm a born and bred New Yorker. So just like a word about me, so you know where I'm coming from with this. Born in Queens, New York. My mother is from Jerusalem. Her parents came to Jerusalem from Casablanca in 1947. My father is a second generation New Yorker. His parents come from probably where many of your parents come from, Poland, Austria, maybe a little bit of Russia in there. So I've got the full gamut sort of behind me, and I grew up in a fairly secular Israeli home, which means it was traditional and much more traditional than your average sort of American Jewish space in many cases. And so what I like to say is that I got a master's degree about it and I got a job about it. In order to deal with all of the complexity of what that was like, I decided, hey, I'll become a Jewish professional, get a master's degree in nonprofit management and Judaic studies from NYU. And I did my undergraduate at University of Maryland and was very involved there at the Hillel. And I worked there as a Hillel professional as well. So that now you have like on one foot, this is who I am. And I live in Maplewood with my husband and my 2 children. And we go to Beth El Synagogue in South Orange. So that's me. I have never seen anti-Semitism like this in a decade of doing this work. I will also name, and I don't know where you all are from in the New Jersey, New York area, where you came from, that I don't think you all have ever seen it quite like this. And so I think it's important to understand always the context that we're working with. When I say I've never seen it like this, why have I never seen it like this? One, we're talking about the rise of social media in the last 15 years, right? When I started college, that is also when Facebook started, right? So 2004. In 2004, we weren't thinking about the internet as a place where there could be potential danger. My friends and I joke about this all the time. You remember when the internet was just cat memes? It was so friendly then. It was so nice. But that's actually not how the internet has progressed and how social media has progressed. And so it's important to remember that it's plausible that the way that people are thinking right now is also very much correlated to the way in which they're engaging with the world. So we've had 2 years now of in and out of quarantine, in and out of being at home in your own space. And our students are socializing in a completely different way than they've ever socialized before. What does that mean? Can somebody tell me when their child first got a phone, their own phone?
Oh boy, way too young.
12,
Yeah.
6th grade.
12, 6th grade. Okay, so just to give you some context, right? And I'm right, like a millennial is considered not a digital native. The generation of students that are coming in now, Generation Z, they're considered digital natives. I grew up with the internet as the internet was growing up. So for me at age 12, nobody had a cell phone. The first cell phone that I ever had was when I was a sophomore in high school. And all my phone did was make phone calls and play Snake. I'm sure you guys remember it, right? The Nokia kind of looked like a block. Those were really great. It had very, very limited ability to do anything. There was no Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. None of these things existed. And so our worlds were small, but they were local. Now, what a phone can do is more than what a PC could do when a PC started, right? A phone is extremely powerful piece of technology with a lot of reach. But what it means is actually that students, young people now, are living inside of their phones, and it's not local, it's global. So they have access to all of this information without context. They don't have clarity on who is creating a lot of this content. And this is not just Jewish students, this is all students. Anybody can put a meme on the internet. Anybody can put something onto Instagram, onto TikTok. There's no such thing as real source checking. And the whole concept of source checking has completely shifted over the last 10, 15 years. So it's just really important to think about that as we're saying, oh, I've never seen it so bad. It's also, it's not in a vacuum. It's a completely different universe. So for us as Hillel professionals, we spend a lot of time and energy helping our students to understand the context that they're living in, right? Oh, you saw a meme. Well, did you look at the source? Oh, it came from Joe Schmo. Okay, well, what are Joe Schmo's credentials? Does Joe Schmo know anything about the Israel-Palestinian conflict, about Jewish history, about who you are? What is your background? What is New York? What are Jews actually, right? So the more we can create opportunities for context development and understanding your own Jewish identity, the better students are able to engage in conversation when they see a meme from someone who knows nothing about no one on the internet, right? They're able to decipher the difference between fact and fiction. And that's really important because we all, right, voted in the 2016 election and saw the rise of fake news. And fake news is not a, it's not a partisan problem. Fake news, the notion that journalism can be proven untrue by anybody, actually puts young people in a really challenging position because it's hard for them to understand what might be truth. And so they're looking to you while they're at home. And when they come to college, they're looking to me and they're saying, Merav, how do I know? And I'm saying to them, okay, let's sit down and have this conversation. That's the gift of having a Hillel on your campus, is we can help them to create that context. So I don't actually think it's as bad as it looks. I think it's deeply siloed, lacking in context and understanding. And the great news is your children are all going to college, which means they're going to be taught critical thinking. They're going to be taught to think about the world broadly. And you know what? They probably already know that, because if you're the sort of parents who have taken the time to come to this on a Sunday to learn about what's going on, they're probably already in very good shape. And so if you want to know what the thing that's keeping me up at night is concern about students who don't have access to adults in their lives who are going to help them understand and contextualize the complexity of what's going on around them. And the degree to which we can create safe opportunities for young people to talk to us about what they're questioning, what they're wondering about, that is the opportunity that we have here. And what keeps me up at night is the fear that there are students who are not accessing that. And that can come from their parents, and it can come from their peers, and it can also come from Hillel professionals, which are a particular type of grown-up. I always forget the name for it, but it's like a third tier grown-up where it's sort of the same category as like a camp counselor or like a trusted guidance counselor, where we're a grown-up with authority, but we're not a parent. And so we can be quite safe. And to that end, my Hillel has piloted, we're the first Hillel to do this in the country, and now we're doing it nationwide, a full-time social worker embedded in our Hillel that's not doing therapy, but doing case management, really paying attention to where students are at in terms of their emotions about anti-Semitism, about post-COVID trauma, about anything that's coming up for them on campus, and helping them, not through therapy, referring out for therapy, helping them to build a toolbox of resources such that they will be able to move through college and out into the world, really investigating what's going on for them and having the tools to deal with what's happening. That's really the future that we're thinking about at Hillel International and at Hunter College. I'll stop because I said a lot of things.
Thanks, Merav. And I'm going to open this up to questions from parents. I'm going to start. I'm going to ask you one more before I do that. So much of what I've been seeing, specifically of students that I've been working with for the last 20 years, is that Jewish students, many of whom are, have progressive social justice issues kind of wired into their DNA,
Sure.
who want to be, engaging with the climate, climate control group, or LGBTQ, or the African, standing up for racial justice and social justice are often being told that unless they check their Zionism at the door, they're being denied a seat at the table. So I'm wondering what specifically you're seeing at Hunter, what you're hearing from colleagues around the country at the schools where our kids are applying to, because they all generally apply to the same schools. Is this one of the biggest challenges you're seeing? And then also what keeps me up at night is not so much the students that are coming to Hillel and having these conversations and expressing their, conflicted views about Israel or anti-Semitism, but the ones that aren't showing up, the ones that are kind of checking out themselves because this is just all so charged, and they just want to have friends. Frankly, they want to have a normal social life when they get to college campus, and they feel that by somehow engaging in issues around Israel makes them just somehow like people don't want to have anything to do with them, so they're just checking out of it.
Sure, really good, thick questions here. So I'll touch on the first thing you asked first about checking liberal ideology at the door. I think I'll start sort of broadly. So I sit on the director's cabinet, which is a representative body of executive directors. We're elected by our peers to represent over 400 executive directors and campuses across the country and also Canada. And we've been talking a lot about what our goals are in terms of how we can support executive directors in North America right now. And one of the things that we're really seeing is it's not actually just about checking your liberal ideology at the door. It's actually coming from both sides. So on the far right, I'm hearing from students, Theodore Herzl is problematic. And the reason he's problematic is because Israel is our indigenous homeland. And students on the left are saying to me, Theodore Herzl is problematic. He's a fascist and a communist. Now, I believe that all of those statements are incorrect, right? But what we're really seeing actually is students are much more willing to engage, and this brings me to the second question you asked, in their Jewish identity than they are willing to engage in how they feel about Israel. Now, this is a very important point. I take extremely seriously deep engagement in your Jewish identity. Now, I have students who come through my Hillel who are super lefty anarchists and will say to me, Merav, Israel shouldn't exist. And I say to them, okay, what about all the other countries? And they say to me, yep, we should get rid of all of those too. Government is bad. And I'm like, okay, at least you're using one moral compass for everybody, right? Like at minimum this. I disagree with you, but at minimum this. But what they want to engage in is their Jewish identity. And to me, that's the key. When Hillels take seriously helping students to feel comfortable in their Jewish identity through learning, through feeling a deep sense of fluency in your Jewish engagement, through feeling connected to your Jewish community at home, through feeling a connection to any Hillel professional, to any Jewish club, to any other Jewish people on campus, making Shabbat dinner, birthright, all of these things flow from a connection and a comfort with their Jewish identity. Only then can they engage in a conversation about Israel, because they first have to feel safe. Jewish is safe. Everybody, and this is an important thing to think about when you're thinking about issues around Israel, everybody agrees that anti-Semitism is bad. The challenge is when anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism become one. When those things are conflated, when something that is anti-Israel is actually also anti-Semitic, that's when our young people have the most trouble. And frankly, let's be honest, that's when we have the most trouble having this conversation. And so to that end, actually, we do this work internally as a staff because we know we got to put our own gas mask on first. So we have nationwide anti-Semitism training that was created by Hillel International in partnership with the ADL, that's been done by campuses across the country and in Canada, and actually internationally as well, to help our staff feel fully educated and comfortable in talking about what anti-Semitism is. And only then can they differentiate between the two. And now we're doing these trainings with our young people, with our students, to help them to understand the difference. And so I would urge you to think about having these conversations with your kids as well. Because if they can feel comfortable having that conversation with you at home, they're much more likely to be able to engage in it when they come across it on social media from a student in class. In terms of checking liberal ideology at the door, I think you're right. I think that there are a lot of spaces that are asking that we as pro-Israel individuals are ignore our Jewishness and our pro-Israel feelings in order to engage in liberal space. And what I say to my students when they come to me and they say that that's happening is I say, and you'll forgive me, that's bullshit. You don't let them do that. You will explain. And that's why the education is so important. I say to them, listen, okay, what is it that they're asking you not to do? Zionism is a progressive ideology. It's the notion that Jews deserve to be emancipated, that they deserve self-determination and their own country. That is what Zionism is about. The fact that this particular liberal group doesn't understand that is an opportunity for us to build a bridge and explain the difference. And I'm with them every step of the way. And most administrations, it's really important that you know this, most administrations are not going to let a BDS resolution pass on the board level. So when you're thinking about, when you're hearing, oh, BDS, 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 don't worry about the resolution. Listen for what the administration is saying. Is the administration saying, yeah, no problem? Or is the administration ignoring the students, letting them have their conversation and airing it out because that's free speech, right? And the Hillel is going to be working with your students, with your children, to make sure that they understand what's going on around them, right? Our role is to help them to integrate that information, to digest it, and to understand the nuance between free speech. Do Palestinian students get to be angry and feel oppressed? Absolutely. Do you get to say to them, it is inappropriate to protest my existence as a Jew and a Zionist? Also, yes. That's what it is to be in a public school. Unless your student is going to an exclusively Jewish school, they're going to be seeing this, but helping them to understand that their liberalism is actually part of the bigger conversation and empowers them to be their best selves, their best Jewish selves in the space. That's really the whole key, in my opinion.
Thank you. A great answer, Merav. I want to open up the floor to parents. We have close to about 10 parents in the room, Merav, who I know are here on a Sunday because these things are really hard. And we're concerned as I'm a parent of 3, 2 of whom are, believe it or not, just going off to college next year. Really concerned about the environment and the climate that they're going to encounter when they get to school. So please, parents, we have certainly another 10 to 15 minutes. Jeff Brazel.
Sure. So I'm a big believer that when you have discussions with people about things that you might not disagree with, you need to know where they're coming from in order to have a productive conversation about the issue. So on campuses, and if you could speak to maybe campuses beyond Hunter College, if you know the information.
Certainly.
Do the kids who are protesting on campus, and this is separate from social media. I mean, social media, who knows where they get the facts and if it's cut and pasted, but when you're having issues on campus with real people, do you get the feeling that the people who are involved on the opposite side are there because A, they're anti-Semitic, B, they're there for social justice issues, they're pro-Palestinian? or other reasons. What are the reasons that you see where people on, I don't want to call it the opposite side, but I'm not even sure what the correct term is. And it
Yeah,
may
I understand.
that's the correct term of what the opposite side should be called. But where are they coming from?
Sure. Can I ask where your child is planning to go to school in the fall?
University of Vermont.
Oh, amazing. The ED there is a very good friend of mine. Matt Vogel is really fantastic. So I actually think that it's a mistake to try to separate out the social media piece here. And the reason why is because many of them, think about it like this, are perhaps they are liberal students, right? Jamie, the liberal student, liberal ideology, progressive student, sees something about how oppressed Palestinians are, believes herself to be a supporter of progressive movements, sees enough social media memes and says, you know what? I went out for Black Lives Matter. I go out for abortion rights. I'm going to go out for this. This seems to me to be aligned. So they're actually, it's so important to take in, they're taking in the social media facts, right? Quote unquote facts as truths. They're taking those in as truths. And that is inspiring them to go out and do what they believe is aligned with their liberal ideology. We see the same thing with Jewish students, right? Who will see all of this, pro-Palestinian, oh my goodness, like there's suffering, like I'm a liberal, I'm a Jew, I care about this. I'm gonna go out for this as well. And then they go to a protest and, at first it's fine because they're protesting for free Palestine. Okay, we can get behind that. And then all of a sudden someone yells from the river to the sea. And the student is like, wait a minute, I didn't sign up for that, right? So in many cases, we actually are seeing students for whom social media is an animator. I think for students who are pro-Palestinian, there are students who are pro-Palestinian. Those students are typically Palestinian, Muslim, of Arab descent, and that's what they're learning at home and in their houses of worship, right? So that's a smaller category, though it is important to note that there are an enormous number of Muslims in this country, right? And they're free to be here and practice Islam. And many of them are not at all radicalized, and many of them understand the nuances of what's happening in Israel. But it's also really important to remember that they're seeing social media and that's activating them.
Yeah, so I didn't mean that we should take social media out of the equation, because clearly social media shapes, I think, probably all of us, or media shapes all of us. But the reason why they're actually coming out, so you spoke to Black Lives Matter and abortion rights and other social issues. So that puts it in a social justice category.
Correct.
Said that the pro-Palestinian aspect is a much smaller piece of it.
Yes.
So maybe
Yes.
that some of my questions about why the people are coming out. So is it more of a social justice issue?
Yes.
And where does anti-Semitism come into that?
Great question. So I think that it's really interesting. For most students, they don't see anti-Semitism, non-Jewish students, and even some Jewish students, if I'm being honest, most non-Jewish people don't understand that anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism can be the same thing. And it's extremely hard to explain to someone who is not Jewish how something that is anti-Zionist may actually be anti-Semitic. It's very complicated. And most Jews don't even understand that there can be a difference, right? There's a difference between saying, I'm angry at the Israeli government and saying the Israeli government should not exist, right? The Israeli government should not exist. That is an anti-Semitic statement. That is saying that the Jewish people do not deserve to have their own country. That is an anti-Semitic statement. To say that you disagree with the Israeli government, I mean, shoot, I disagree with the Israeli government all the time. I disagree with the American government. And so we make that point often. So I think that's actually where it comes in. But by and large, I think you're seeing social media activation around liberal progressive ideology, pushing folks into that space of protesting and coming out against Israel.
Thanks, Merav. We have a couple of questions,
Sure.
Ben, and then,
Thanks, Merav, and thanks also. So I'm really deeply grateful that you're there to be there for Jewish kids on campus and have those conversations with them when they're dealing with, sort of like the organized conversations around Israel on campus. But I want to sort of piggyback on Jeff's question about, and also what Linda said about the social cost. So, so I've got 3 kids, 24, 22, 19. One is a recent college graduate, 2 are at university right now. No, sorry, one is at university right now, and one is going to start in the fall. For me, like, the hard part in talking to them about all this is actually not, I'm Jewishly connected. I know all sorts of, I'm ready to talk to them about Zionism and anti-Semitism and their identity, all that stuff. The hard part is I'm not living in their social sphere online on their devices. And they lean left politically. They are compelled by social justice issues. They do. The people they want to be in relationship with socially are not only Zionists and not only Jews.
Yeah.
And when they are overwhelmed, and they are overwhelmed sometimes by what they see online, and then their friends who they care about and agree about most things about, pile on to that, whatever it is they do on TikTok, piling, right? That is I think that's like a legitimate hard space for young people to be in, where there is social risk at play of speaking up.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wonder, like, do your students talk to you about that? And what sort of kills?
Yeah, so it's such a great question. And I want to reflect back to you how incredible it is that you are so keenly aware of that, because I don't actually think that many parents get that. And so for all of you in the room, like, kol hakavod for knowing this information, knowing what that feels like. And it's really hard also for students right now because of the 2 years that they have endured, in that they actually are pretty bad at having in-person conversations. Much worse than we've ever seen before. It's impacting the way that we're able to engage with them. It's impacting how they open up to us, how they engage with us on a number of levels. This is one of the reasons that we brought in a social worker. When students come to us hearing things like this on TikTok, there are a couple of different ways that they typically react. The first is that they will say, Merav, or more often than not, they come to one of my engagement staff. I work a lot more with the student leader, so it's really like 20 or 30. And those are highly engaged, highly emotionally intelligent juniors and seniors. But for freshmen, they'll come to an engagement staff, they'll say, I saw this thing on TikTok, it really upset me. And so we'll say, well, what did you do? And what they usually do is one of the following things, depending on their personality. 1, I ignored it. Like, I saw it, it upset me. I know it's not true, I'm going to ignore it. 2, I saw this thing, it gave me some questions. Can we talk about the things that were said? Help me understand. Or 3, and I have actually more and more students like this, Jewish TikTok is a thing. I really recommend you, I hate saying this, but get on TikTok, check out Jewish TikTok. See what Jewish TikTok says. I mean it. I know it sounds crazy. I'm on Jewish TikTok and I'm like, listen, I'm 35. TikTok is like foreign to me. It's really not the way that my generation engages, but folks, really, if you get to understand a little bit about Jewish TikTok, you'll see there are some amazing content creators creating Jewish stuff on TikTok, pro-Israel, pro-Jewish stuff on TikTok. And it's cool. It's cool even according to my like anarchist students. So I know it's cool. And they'll repost that. And that's really important also, right? So on the one hand, right, social media is the worst, but it's also really great because it's creating an opportunity for young people to express themselves on what really matters to them. I mean, there's a woman who's teaching Talmud on TikTok. It's kind of amazing. Like, whoever thought a woman teaching Talmud on TikTok? So that's what I would say is, like, the more your kids feel either empowered to like talk back if they want to engage with it, or to actually just know, like, you know what, I don't have to engage with this. That's another really important thing about social media, and we say this to our students all the time. Take the concept of Shabbat really seriously when you're thinking about social media. Take a day off. I actually made my students Shabbat sleeping bags for their cell phones, and gave everybody like a little like hemp bag, like, you know, to put their cell phones in for like an hour or two on Shabbat if they're not Shomer Shabbat. And the feedback has been really enormous. To just not engage a little bit makes an enormous difference. But ask your kids about what they're seeing on TikTok, talk to them, answer their questions, help them with resources. And if you want, actually, I'm happy to send to Linda. There's a great video that Berkeley Hillel came out with about anti-Semitism, really explaining it from scratch. That might be a really useful tool for you to even just have for yourself as a resource.
Great. I would love for you to send it to me.
Happy to.
Everybody, thank you.
And the Jewish TikTok links.
And the Jewish-
Is it just called Jewish TikTok, or there?
Yeah, I'll send some links over. Actually, Matt Vogel from Vermont is very active in Jewish TikTok, so you'll be able to find him as well.
Right, that's great. That's excellent advice. I think we have, time for one more question. So
It sort of
please go.
piggybacks on that, to like add, like, I understand you don't have all the answers, but how do you answer that question of, hey, you know, I am liberal, I have these ideologies, and my friends that have the similar ideologies as me are now picking up on this issue. What are the, how do you respond to that, or where do we teach them to research it? What are some other places to find, you know, information and maybe
Such a great question. Without making them do a full master's degree in Judaics, which I highly recommend for background, I found it to be really useful. But if they want to do something a bit more lucrative with their lives, which I also recommend, I think it's really the easiest place to start is with understanding their relationship with the American federal government. So if you can have a conversation with a student, right? And I'll say that, like, my father's a social studies teacher. So like, I've had a lot of conversations, like from a very young age, about my relationship with the federal government, which maybe not everybody does. But when your dad's a social studies teacher, that's just sort of like what happens at dinner. So it's important to think about, well, America was founded for, okay, freedom. Freedom of what? Freedom of religion, freedom to do X, Y, or Z. Freedom at the cost of whom? Freedom at the cost of whom? Land at the cost of whom? Understanding that context within an American context is really helpful grounding, because then you can say, all right, there are no countries, zero. That's the number of countries that exist without any other cost. That's the number, zero. And the moment you can create that connection for your kids, you can then start having the conversation about Israel. Now, listen, there are some really great books that I would recommend you all read. You should read The Promised Land by Ari Shavit. It's a great book. Really helps you to understand some of the nuances. You can read Letters to My Palestinian Neighbor, also fantastic. I can send you some book recommendations. Honestly, I'm happy to send some book recommendations. I send these to my students all the time, and I tell them I'm going to buy you some books for your Jewish library, but the deal is you have to come back and have a chavruta with me about it. And they all do. Jewish students, non-Jewish students, I send these books to them all the time. So the second you can help them make that connection, okay, to their relationship with the federal government that they understand a little bit better, and then help them to contextualize that around Israel. Okay, Israel exists. For whom? At what cost? Understanding that there are people who are going to suffer in order for another government to stand, and that there's a difference between a frustration with a government and the belief that that government should exist. That is the fundamental difference that social media is robbing our students of. Be mad at Israel, they do things wrong. Be mad at America, they do things wrong. Nobody's walking around talking about America not existing. No one should be walking around talking about Israel not existing. It's a non-starter. If you don't believe Israel should exist, I'm sorry, we can't actually talk.
That's, sorry, I mean, that's actually our earlier speaker before you, Rachel Fish, Merav, put it a different way. There's no country that was created in the Immaculate Conception, right? That there were, yes, there was always some collateral damage, and not that we aren't sensitive to other people who were on this land, but Israel was not the only country created this way. I do want to say that you framed it in really a magnificent way, that, you know, I'm sitting here as a director who invited you to speak, but also as a parent of 3 teenagers, 2 of whom are going off to college in the fall. And I think that you've really answered the questions in a different way that I've heard them. So I'm truly grateful to you for being here today. The books you've suggested are excellent. We actually are giving out Yossi Klein Halevi's Letters to My Palestinian Neighbor today.
Such a good book.
Daniel Gordis's A Short History of Israel. Of course, students need to open them up, like they need to crack open those books. And I would say this too as parents, you know, when I'm asked like how best we can advise our kids before they go off to college, it is to try and do a little bit of informing themselves of these complicated issues, to go off to college with an opinion, right? It can be left, right, or again, conflicted center, but to have an opinion and to develop a confidence in where you stand. Because with that, I think you're much better positioned when you go off for this next journey. As 18-year-olds, we don't know a lot, but I think it really does behoove us to try, if we care enough, to educate ourselves a little bit before we go off on this.
I totally agree. I think it's really wonderful to hear that from you. And also I want to name, like, yes, it's good for them to have this information. And also it's okay for them to not have every answer. The most important thing is for them to feel comfortable in where they're at in the journey. So if where they are is like, I love Israel, I don't want to deal with the complexity, that's allowed. I love Israel, I want to dive into the complexity, that's allowed. I don't love Israel because it's too complicated, I can't get there. Okay, fine, buy them some books, leave them there for them, bring it up in conversation. It's there, right? But that's important too. What we used to do, I mean, when I was in college, there was a lot of, and this is language that's still used, and you've maybe noticed that I did not once use the word fight, combat. Our students are not soldiers. They are young people trying to figure it out. They've been through hell for the last 2 years. They're traumatized and they're tired just like you are, and they're not here to fight a war. We're not going to solve peace in the Middle East at Rutgers, at Maryland, at Vermont, at Hunter. We're not going to do it. All we can do is give them context and support them.
Well, not every Hillel director at every university is as awesome as you are. But I think we all leave here today feeling grateful that the support does exist on every one of the campuses that our students are going to be spending 4 years of their lives at. And I'm also grateful to know that you are really close by Merav Braun lives in, as she said, in Maplewood. Now that you are known to me and known to us and our federation, I have no doubt that we'll be calling upon you again. So thank you so much on this very complicated day in your life, dealing with 2 kids with COVID. Refuah shlema to both of them. May you also stay COVID-free, Merav. And thank you for sharing all your expertise and wisdom and guidance with us today.
Thank you so much. Be in touch with any questions, truly.
Parents, we invite you for a slice or a couple of slices of pizza and conversation. And then we have one final event for a speaker for you and your children, and for lunch. Merav, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Yeah.